If you're a Black female artist or creative or entrepreneur and you offer a service or some kind of entertainment to your community or to the world at large, I need you to understand this one important lesson. You are damned if you do, and you are damned if you don't. So you may as well produce the art and create the kind of business and service that makes the most sense to you and your bottom line. And it's important for you to not take into consideration too much what people think. And I'm not saying this to say that you are not supposed to listen to the opinions of other people, nor am I saying that you're not supposed to be receptive to criticism or feedback, because those things can be very important. But I am saying that you need to leave room for your opinion to have veto over what other people might say in the event that you believe that that's what's best for you and your bottom line. I'm going to use the scandal of Beyonce winning Album of the Year and Country Album of the Year as well to point this out. 4 different times Beyonce was snubbed. 4 different times the overwhelming court of public opinion and even critics themselves said that Beyonce deserved to win Album of the Year. When Beyonce finally gets it after 28 years in the industry, 28 successful years of back-to-back #1 albums and back-to-back top 10 hits, accused of paying for the award. People are saying that she didn't deserve the award. People are saying that there's DEI being involved. People are saying that Jay-Z bribed somebody for her. And yet, when you listen to Cowboy Carter, when you listen to Beyonce's discography, you will see artistic excellence. And this isn't just my opinion. This is the opinion of music critics, both an important example to use because she's the one Black woman that many Black women across the world, whether they're in Africa, the Caribbean, or in predominantly white continents and countries, can relate to. Knowing that no matter how hard you work, no matter how quality your body of work can be, no matter how good and deserving you are, people will always try and discredit you and discredit the entirety of who you are purely because they don't think you deserve to have the success that you do. When I was living in the West, so many Black girls can relate to stories like this where we're in group settings, we're in work settings, where we have the audacity to do really well and then outperform and outshine people, not through any kind of arrogance, but purely because of how good we can be. And then we're treated badly as a result of it, or we're isolated as a result of it, or we're downplayed, or our achievements are questioned. You know, there are so many Black students who are constantly accused of plagiarism because how dare they produce a body of work in school that's so good. In so many ways, you're not allowed to be a head above the rest. And this applies to all Black people, but when we look at being Black and then being female, we have to honor the intersection of gender and race, and then the double whammy that we feel when we experience these things, where who we are always has to be in line with what will make other people comfortable. When we look at people who've been snubbed in the past in the context of award shows, the people who won over those that were snubbed did not receive the level of hatred and vitriol that Beyonce is getting. And there are some people who argue and say that, oh, it's because of her attachment to her husband and his affiliation to Jay-Z. But yet the same feminists who are now accusing Beyonce of paying for her award are the same ones who will tell you not to attach a man's actions to a woman. But that argument is obviously not being extended to Beyonce. I always say that when other women are successful, people praise it. But when African and Black women are successful, people question it. Now, that's just in the Western context. But when you look at it through the global context, there's a very unique obsession that people have with the suffering of the Black body, in particular, the suffering of the Black female body. When you look at the album Lemonade by Beyonce as an example, and I don't mean that in the context of award shows or what award she deserved or didn't deserve. I'm talking about the content of the Lemonade album. The Lemonade album revealed that Beyonce was on the receiving end of not just infidelity, but also emotional and potentially psychological abuse at the hands of her husband, Jay-Z. Abuse and pain that was so awful that it caused her to have miscarriages. And I'm not just saying this as a speculation. Jay-Z himself, in his own confessional album, in the title song 444, said, and I quote, to Beyonce, "I apologize for all the stillborns. Because I wasn't present, your body wouldn't accept them." And when you watch the Lemonade movie, when you listen to the music, and when you read the poems that were written for that album, you will see at least a decade of pain and abuse and torture that Beyonce was subjected to at the hands of her husband. And it took her going through all of that before she was finally worthy of his goodness, before she was finally granted a healthy marriage, before she was finally able to experience her own happily ever after. And the idea of a woman suffering in order to be loved by a man is not something that is isolated to Lemonade. It is not something that is isolated to Beyonce and Jay-Z. It is an experience that is very, very familiar to Black and brown women worldwide, not just in the West, but even in the African continent, even in the Caribbean, even where we are the majority. There is this need for us to suffer and go through pain in order for us to be worthy of goodness. And not even the kind of suffering that comes from working hard for a nice body and going to the gym, not the kind of suffering that comes from, working extremely hard, in the library so you can pass your exams, not the righteous suffering that brings about a good result, but the kind of suffering that leaves you questioning whether or not it was even worth it, even when the goodness comes along. And from a woman's experience, there is this need for her to prove her ability to handle, quite frankly, bullshit, for us to be able to be deemed worthy of the goodness and the love that we deserve. For example, I think it was Pastor John Gray. Forgive me if his name is not John, but it was Pastor Gray from the United States, an African-American pastor, who said that his wife went through more pain giving birth to him as a man than giving birth to their 4 children. And a lot of Black and African men were praising him for that. So what relevance is this to Album of the Year? What relevance is this to the Beyonce scandal? The whole point of this entire video and everything I'm saying is, as a Black woman, the system that is currently operating in the world at large does not have your benefit in mind. And when it does have your benefit in mind, it usually comes at a very, very, very high cost. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. So you may as well do what works. Because typically, when we do what works, the community is benefited anyway. When we focus on our businesses, the community is benefited with the service. When we're honest with our art, the community is benefited with good art. So either way, our selfishness oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes leads to the goodness of greater humanity, at least in the context of our community and our environment. So focus on yourself and focus on what it is that you have to do. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So you may as well do what works for you. And that's the best advice I can give to Black female artists and creatives. See you next time.